Hey everyone, I'm Armor Gaming, welcome back to my channel, and welcome to Monster Legends. Welcome to the 5th episode of Monster Legends Explained, where we go over the different monster types. And the last type of monster you'll find in Monster Legends are the torture dealers. Alright, and I was kind of iffy about making this episode, just because I feel like torture dealers are, there's very few monsters that are pure, like, they only are there to apply torture effects. Usually, the torture is mixed in with like a monster that can control, or with an attacker. Typically a monster will attack and then apply some sort of torture. The monsters that rely purely on applying torture skills is very small. I have one of them right here on the left hand side, the mythic monster Zavi Pit, but typically it's going to be all mixed. But nonetheless, I think there's enough torture different effects to make a designated video for it. So with that being said, what is a torture skill? A torture skill, also known as a dot or damage over time, so I'll use all those interchangeably, but the actual term from SocialPoint is torture, is that it literally tortures the enemy over a period of time, or again, damage over time, DOT dot. So let's go ahead and click feed. So skills, and we'll just change skills. So see the status effect, it's red, it says drowned. See this one that says quicksand, see this one that says bleed, poison, nightmares. These are all different types of torture skills. So, if we read the description for example, Quicksand deals 15% of earth damage each turn, deals low physical damage on each turn, damage reduced by 20%. So, since when was bleeding physical damage? Poison deals low nature damage each turn, and so let's see what else we have. Here's bleeding again, here's the nightmares, deals low dark damage. So all those are examples of torture, and all torture skills will last for a period of time. So poison says 4 turns, nightmare says 3 turns, quicksand says 4 turns, drown is 3. Typically it tends to be 3. Sometimes you'll see 2 with ignition specifically. Here, let's take a look at this monster. We have a quicksands, and we have a quicksand again, and just a bunch of quicksand. And again, Tessaday, he's not a pure torture dealer. Let's take a look at this monster right here. Lots of you probably know this monster. We have a sunburn, deals low light damage. We have a burning, fire damage. We have a poison, nature damage. And so we essentially have there's the 2 turns. Ignition inflicts low fire damage on each turn. So basically we tend to have a torture skill for every element, right? We even have bleeding for physical damage. So again, in terms of a pure torture dealer, there's very few in the game, and because typically the monster will tend to do more than just apply dots. Now that being said, this is a good example of a monster that primarily relies on applying torture. If you look through his other skill set, well, he doesn't really offer much. Like, okay, he can make the enemy weak to certain elements, but typically this monster's main purpose is torture. So you might be wondering, what is the point of torture? Why do I care about monsters that can apply torture? Well, if you're going up against really tanky monsters, torturing is the way to go. So actually, if I show you PvP right now and I refresh, I see a level 120 Armor Claw, I see a Dun Raw, I see, let's see what else do I see. There's that Armor Claw again, there's Hyperia, there's that Mega Taunt monster. So the best thing about damage over time is that, especially if your monsters are weak, if you can apply a bunch of torture to the enemy team, you could probably kill them just by stalling. And so this is a really great way to put these monsters to work with maybe your deny monster, maybe your control monster, right? Have 2 control monsters and a torture dealer, and just keep chaining the control and just whittle down the enemy's HP over time. Or maybe you have 2 torture dealers and each can apply their own set of torture, and then immediately you're just going after the HP. Because the thing about torture skills is it doesn't care what your strength stat is. You could have a 0 strength stat. The minute the torture lands on the enemy team, you are good to go. The torture will chomp away at their life. So that's what you want to do with torture. Now you have to be careful because there are some monsters that are immune to torture. If you look at their trait, they cannot get hit with any torture effect, okay? So those are the kind of monsters that you either have to trait disable them and then torture them, or you're just going to have to beat them with raw damage output. And then there's some monsters that are just immune to specific torture. Typically you'll find that monsters within their own element, like this is a fire monster, so this monster happens to apply low fire damage. And he also has ignition, once again fire damage. And this earth monster right here, he tends to have, well, you already saw it, this monster has quicksand, which is earth damage. So typically within your own element, you'll have that torture skill if you are an attacker or even a control monster. And then sometimes when you have a monster of a specific element, it'll tend to be immune to its own torture. like this fire monster being immune to burning. However, this really mostly applies to the OG monsters. A lot of the newer monsters are gonna have probably the hardened trait or the tough trait, and hardened just gives you like a baseline 20% less accuracy against any negative effect, which is useful because this gives you some sort of immunity to all tortures. Now with that being said, there's a hierarchy of torture because some torture effects are way better than other torture effects. So really quickly, we're just going to demonstrate the torture skill so you can actually see it in action. We'll do that in adventure map, and then we'll go through the whole list of torture effects, which by the way, this is one reason why when you fight a monster, the boss in adventure map, if you do adventure map, they're literally immune to every single torture effect, because otherwise you could easily take them down. So in order to fight, I am going to make sure I can trade disable because I want to go crazy with the torture. So I'm going to run this monster, and I'm going to run my mythic monster. Where are you? You're like, what, level 100? So I'm going to run Zavi Pit. And I am also going to run, who else is really good at doing torture that I know? I feel like it's honestly not as much as I would think. I'm going to run, who comes to mind? So I'm actually going to run Wormlad, even though he's not really a torture dealer. He has like one skill that applies really good torture, which like I mentioned, there's not really like pure torture monsters in the game. Usually they do a lot more. So with that being said, what Wormlad can do is this Righteous Evil skill, which applies Sunburn and Curse. So fortunately, this monster is not immune to Sunburn and Curse. And Curse, you might notice, it only says 1 turn, even though when you were to read the description, it would say 3 turns. The cool thing about Curse, it is, as of the time recording this video, the best torture, I would say. This removes 10% of life and stamina, and then it doubles to 20% of life and stamina, and then it doubles again to 40% of life and stamina. So it is really powerful if you don't cleanse it somehow. With that being said, let us trade disable. Awesome. And let's see what I can apply. Applies Drown to an enemy. Yeah, let's do Drowned. So now they have Curse, Sunburn, and Drowned. And then let's go ahead and do Quicksand and Bleed. Ooh, maybe. Poison Nightmares, nah. And yeah, let's go with the Bleed and the Quicksand. So I'm going to slow it down and just take a look at everything this monster has. Curse, Sunburn, Drown, Bleeding. Look at his life stat. It is over 700,000, okay? Even these monsters right here, let's take a look at what happens just when I recharge. The monster loses, well, that one almost died, 21,000. Alright, let's hurry this up, man. 21,000. And then, look at that, almost 500,000 damage. Alright, so watch. My monster got stunned. This is actually a perfect showcase. So my monster got stunned, I'll just recharge. Let's say all of my monster's turns got skipped. Look, that one died. 500, because remember, Curse got stronger, over 500,000, that monster died. So that is the power of torture skills. They can literally take away an enemy's HP no matter how high their HP is, because it is a percentage of their life stat. It doesn't matter if they have 100,000 HP or 10 HP. It is going to be 15%, 20%, 30%, whatever it is. Alright, and so with that being said, let's go over the current torture effects as of the time recording this video. In the future, there may be more torture effects. I mean, that's fine, right? As long as you know how torture effects work and what they do, that's perfectly fine. So with that being said, this is alphabetized, so it goes from Bleeding to Sunburn. Bleeding will deal dark damage equal to 10% of total life and reduces damage output. Burning deals fire damage and it's 15%, and these are both for 3 turns. Curse, even though it says 2 turns, is actually for 3 turns. Once again, this is what I consider to be the best torture. It is 10% of life and stamina, and then doubles to 20% of life and stamina, and then doubles again to 40% of life and stamina. That's 10, 20, and 40. That is 70% of life and stamina over the course of 3 turns. It's crazy strong. If you just like mega stun a monster, mega possess, and do the curse, they're done for. Drown deals water damage equals to 10% of total life and drains stamina as well. So some of these torture also impact and drain stamina. This one, Ignite, deals fire damage equal to 20% of total life. That's why this one's only for 2 turns, right? So Burning over the course of 3 turns does 45% of total life, whereas Ignite will deal 40%, but it does it faster because in 2 turns. Nanovirus deals metal damage equal to 10% of total life, and this one is a little unique because it actually blocks positive effects, which is pretty darn incredible, right? If the enemy can't put any positive effects on themselves, so Nanovirus is really good. Nightmares will deal 5% of dark damage and drain 10% of stamina. So okay, I guess it's less damage because of the stamina drain, but then the water version, Drowned, it drains more stamina and more HP, so Drowned is clearly a lot better than Little Nightmares. Poison is essentially the same as Bleeding, but the nature version. right? 10% of total life, 20% of 20% of damage reduction. Quicksand is 15% of total life, equivalent to like burning. Shock deals thunder damage equal to 5% of its total life, and it blocks the ability to give extra turns. So, shock specifically, if the enemy monster has an extra turn skill, let's say you're fighting a Voltic, a Rara, a Zyla, a Rekka, a Prince Charmless, any monster that has a skill that would give them an extra skill, if they are impacted with shock, it actually prevents them from being able to utilize their extra turn, which is pretty amazing, right? And then we have Sunburn. So, I mean, let's go back to shock. So, if you don't have a monster that can apply it, and if you don't have a monster with the anticipation trait, and you're going up against a monster that has a lot of extra turn skills, maybe your best advantage would be to try to land the shock against them. And with that being said, then we have Sunburn, which deals low light damage equal to 10% of total life and reduces accuracy by 15%. So, once again, my personal favorite is that curse. It is amazing at torture. And then I really love Sunburn. The reason I love Sunburn is because the accuracy reduction. Anything that reduces accuracy, anything that makes it more likely that an enemy will miss, I think is amazing. And then I really love the nanovirus for the ability to block positive effects. After that, everything's really kind of like whatever. Again, shock is nice if you can land it on a monster with extra turn skills, but typically once you play long enough in the game, you'll have anticipation, you'll have something, and you don't even encounter a lot of those extra turn monsters. So, with that being said, this has been a pretty thorough video going over torture effects, how they work. I mean, like I said, this is not really a torture monster, but I felt like the video needed to be made because there's still plenty of torture effects, and there are monsters that are reliably more focused on applying torture skills. So those are the monsters that don't necessarily need strength. You put team speed, or if it's a tank, you put life. It really just depends on what other category that monster is occupying. Because like I said, there's not really like a pure torture dealer. There's maybe like 3 in the game that I can think of. So with that being said, this is the 5th episode on Monster Types Explained. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And I've been thinking about making a video about revivers and healers and maybe applying negative effects like negate healing, but I don't know if a video for every single type of that monster is specifically warranted. I think when you break it down, there's really only attackers and control, and then of course support, tank, and torture. So yeah, I don't think the revivers and the healers, I think those really fall into like a support monster role. So with that being said, guys, yeah, that's going to be it for this. I hope you guys really enjoyed it. Make sure to share this with anyone if you found these kinds of videos useful, and remember to subscribe.